Hey everyone, I am Dr. Eric Richards, and I am coming to you for my third podcast as it relates to my campaign to win the seat for the Board of Education in Cherokee County, District number 5. Hope you're having a great Saturday morning. I'm going to try to post this up right away, so it might still be Saturday morning. Today, my goal, and I don't know how well the board would show up in this video, but my goal is to talk a little bit about kind of divisive communication versus healthy debate and disagreement. This was kind of a plan that I had worked out. I've got a few different topics that I've set up that I know I'm going to be talking about. And then the order, I pushed this one forward to today, and I might try to record 2 today, so it would have happened today anyways. But I did because I just had a video shared with me by a staff member of mine. She works for me, has worked for me for a number of years now. And it was Andy Stanley, pastor of North Point Churches, and it was him as the Georgia Assembly's chaplain, and he gave them some advice, and it was just on the 15th of March. At least that's when it was posted to YouTube. So I don't know, maybe it happened before that time, but it was really about divisive speech and disagreement. And it was interesting because he's talking about why have division, because division isn't good. Now I will say I had a comment, and I'm probably going to stay on this, where I believe through a little bit of divisive speech you actually can create unity following that. In other words, it's almost like sometimes you have to break it up to be able to pull it back together. The mess when you clean out the closet. The way you start is with the mess to get back to an organized closet. I think there's a little bit of that's necessary, and I want to talk about that today. I do want to first start, though. I want to talk a little bit about my previous podcast, and then also my campaign platform, my hashtag. So in previous podcast, I had one that I titled it, it's all about the children, and in it I proceeded to talk all about me. At least that's one of the people who commented had said that. It's like you say it's all about the children, and it's like me. I never could vote for this guy. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. But hey, at least now you know who I am. And so just for you guys to know, the reason why I titled it that way was because I was titling, it's all about what I have done for children's health. Actually, it was all about the children's health. And that's really it. It was a lot of me, but I wanted you to get to know me and what I've committed to over the years to grow health. Now, is there a selfish, goal out of a lot of this stuff? Well, yeah, the selfish goal is there's multiple, right? There's one, make profit. If I'm in a business where I'm looking to earn money, it's to make profit and increase what I can offer to my family. And that's really what that goal is. Number 2, is to have an impact on my own family. It's always been my greatest goal, and I've never said anything other than this, but my greatest goal in my practice or in my endeavors is to find a way to ensure that my kids are set up for the best possible life. And isn't that what really makes humans, special, right? In the world of the animal kingdom, it's this idea of legacy for our children. I don't think you really see much of that in the animal kingdom. Maybe there's survival, but legacy, what I want to do is I want to be able to give you a step up so you can step on my shoulders and go higher. That's a cool thing. And I think it's something that we should all be striving towards for our kids. I've definitely strived hard for that. Adair Park, my daughter's going to kill me for saying this, here in downtown Woodstock is named as such because Adair is her middle name. Now, in that, I've told her, look, this could cause you to be a little bit prideful over having a development in downtown Woodstock that's got your namesake on it. I want you to remember that your goal in this is to always identify that, Dad and Mom, they were able to do something that is going to have some form of legacy, and they chose to associate me with it. Not that it's something that I did. You didn't do anything for this, but we decided to associate you with this because we want you to learn to have a humble discussion about this. How do you talk about that without becoming boisterous? And it's going to be a challenge, no doubt. We like those challenges. So just that's what the goal of that podcast was to just share who I am. So, and I know I've had a bunch of people reach out to me kind of privately saying, I didn't see that at all. I'm like, great, thank you so much. But even if it was true, hey, okay, that's something for me to work on. I'm not coming into this perfect by any stretch. All right. So that was that. Next, so my child, my choice. What in the world does that mean? I mean, we get, that's a great little tagline. Yeah, my child, my choice. You know, I don't want my kid to have this or that or this or that or that. I want them to have this or that or this or that or this or that, right? Well, if you got, 50,000 individual people and none of the thises and that's line up, it's obviously not a very conducive to efficiency kind of mentality, right? We can't create a really effective school system off of a whole bunch of individuals. If it's truly your child, your choice, then you should be homeschooling. And I believe that. If you want 100% of the choices, you should homeschool. And you'd say, well, that's not possible. Then it's not possible to have 100% of the choices. But when I say my child, my choice, I believe it's evident that this community is more conservative than it is progressive. And that in that, the conservative voice should be the louder voice. That's the voice that should have a greater impact on policy. Now, that said, what a great opportunity for us to discuss what does that look like then from having a divisive communication that actually gets us back to a place where now it's just some disagreement that allows us to come to a place of relative unity. Because in the end, it's easy for us to say that everyone on the right is this, and this. They're racist. They're all holier than thou. I had someone comment, if I had a wart on my butt for every time one of you people come along thinking you're so smart, or I'd have a wart smarter than all of you, or something like that. I was like, well, okay, that's funny. I just found it funny. But yeah, fine. Lump me into this like you just are like a blah 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 freedom, bam bam bam, guns in the air, fireworks, red, white, and blue flags. And then on the other side is to say, like they all kneel when the national anthem's played. None of them have any patriotic spirit. They're all trying to destroy American values. They're all Marxist, socialist, whatever, right? And all of us know that that's not true. We all know that not everyone over here is this, and not everyone over there is that. And so. And that's kind of where I loved what Andy Stanley was talking about in this video. And I'll post the video somewhere here. I already posted it on my Facebook page. But I'll post it, maybe in the comments on this YouTube. So if you're watching this via YouTube and nothing else, you'll be able to see it there. It's something that often, that kind of speech is done to win elections and to show how powerful and strong I'll be for the majority or, try to win those votes, right? And I am. There's one thing I definitely am is I have no problem speaking in a way that's extremely black and white as far as, well, what about a specific, idea, a specific, plan? How does this work out? But in the end, I'm not black and white in taking away the rights of others. I'm black and white in protecting the rights of those. So it's a different thing, and I really want to get into that. So that's what we're going to talk about. So. When we look at this, let me relate it first back to just understanding what matters most. And I think that's, something that's really important. Like what matters most? Because we sometimes get into the trivial battle. And I think back to my ex-pastor, Gavin Adams, who Gavin's a friend of mine as well. And Gavin was talking about the message was basically about loving, everyone and not hating everyone. And I think it was everyone for everyone was kind of the idea. And taking a bit from Jesus's playbook, look, he was very, very critical. He didn't like, oh, well, no, I want to be empathetic to you, so it's okay that you're doing all the things opposite of what I teach. No, he didn't do that. He was very critical of, no, you're not doing things right. You need to change that. But listen, I'm going to love you through the change. I'm going to help you through the change. If you don't change, guess what? I'm going to come back and I'm going to love you again, and I'm going to advise you to change. And I'm going to love you again and advise you to change. So now I don't get to make the judgment of like what you're doing is right or wrong unless you tell me that, well, I'm a Christian, I believe this, and maybe I can say, okay, well, let's hold the umbrella of Christianity over you then. But if you're not, I can say, I think you should be, but other than that, I really shouldn't hold you accountable to those rules. I mean, that's You didn't subscribe to them. So now it becomes more of a, well, how do we respect one another without what you want changing what I can do, or what I want changing what you can do? And that's where we get to a place of unity. And so what Gavin had said in that message, it was pretty funny actually. This is one example, was going into the tag office and getting the tag renewal and or getting a new tag basically, and then getting the question, well, do you want the oh my gosh, I just totally forgot what it said about for God. I can't believe it. Well, either way, on the bottom of our license plates, we have that reference to God. I drew a blank on that completely. I feel like Joe Biden. No, I'm just kidding, guys. For those who are down, well, no, I'm not really kidding. But yeah. So, anyways, and I'll remember it at some point here. I don't know why I forgot it. But then the other option is you have your county, right? Like Cherokee, Cobb, whatever. So he was saying how he really likes the idea of putting the county on, because when he's traveling somewhere, like if he's out of the state and you're down at the beach or you're somewhere, you kind of like when you see like another Georgia plate on the road and maybe they're driving alongside of you, and you kind of want to back up a little bit so you can really get a good look and see, oh, they're from Cobb. Oh, they're from Cherokee. I wonder who they are. Maybe you want to pull ahead a little bit. This is kind of, I think this was the whole conversation. You pull ahead a little bit so they can see where you're from, and it's like, hey, Cherokee County, woohoo, right? I mean, it's kind of a neat thing. But it's like he felt like he was being judged for putting the county on and not, the reference to God, So it's kind of like, well, wait a second. Does that really matter? I mean, like, what matters most? Does it matter most that I'm not choosing to display my faith on my license plate? I think it matters more that I would be displaying my faith in how I treat my fellow man, right? My communication. So, and I've had a lot of people through the pandemic. If you guys want to know how aggressively I spoke about COVID, you need to just befriend me. I'll say yeah, and then go back, and I'll try to go back and start posting some of these, reposting some of these. I took so much heat, and I just kept going because I knew what I knew to be truth, and I knew it to be truth because of history, because of what I knew, because I'd spent so much time paying attention to how public health figures, promote every potential pandemic. And I'm like, guys, listen, in the end, and I get this, it feels bad for someone who wants to just be empathetic to everyone. It feels bad to see someone over there across the aisle saying, no, you're not going to put mask on my kid. Like, no mask. And they're like, okay, so you don't care about the health of others. Like, well, no, actually. I do care about the health of others. As a matter of fact, go back and listen to what I've been preaching. I've been preaching that now in this moment in time, you should be working on your health more than anything, because there is a real risk associated with COVID based upon those in a very small percentage who are at risk because of their health. But there is actually some quantifiable components to your immune system and your ability to fight. And in the end, you need to be pursuing those. That's the only way, because trust me, and this was the message, in the end, you won't be able to avoid it. As a whole, some people will definitely avoid it, but only because they themselves chose to make all of the right decisions with their interactions with others, not global sweeping mandates. They do not work. Look at the numbers, guys, in the data, right? So that was my message. And it's easy to say, he's so mean, he hates people. Well, that's really an emotional response. It has nothing to do with you yourself, me, myself, getting together in a disagreement, position, but into a communication, that may be somewhat confrontational, but that leads us to fully understanding each other's position on this without the aggressive emotional response. And that's really what I'm talking about with this, that we sometimes just go straight to emotional. And I think if we do, it says that we don't really care about a relationship. We only care about getting what we want. And I would say, I want to get what I want, but because we've worked through it, through a relationship that identifies completely what your reasons are for what you want and what my reasons are for what I want. Now, I wanted to use some examples out here outside of COVID too, because I think this helps us understand maybe where some people aren't being transparent, where some of the leadership in school board, in county government, in state government, in federal government aren't being transparent. And say if it stays at an emotional level and there's a lack of communication into the details, then that says to me typically all day long, that is someone who's not willing to identify that they're being driven by emotion for something they want over something they think is truly correct or right. And the more that a politician throws out, you're racist because you don't like CRT, or you're a Marxist because you do. I think that's do I believe that CRT training kind of falls under some Marxist principles, which is basically the idea that when you look at at someone in a social environment, you're basically saying that they there's a large quantification, like a massive quantification that makes you less than or worse than. And that's the problem I have with CRT. I'm not a racist by any stretch, but there are definitely people who would say, well, because Eric doesn't support CRT in the schools or globally taught anywhere, Eric's a racist. And I would say, no, that's not at all the case. I absolutely believe that the effort towards equality makes sense. Man, I mean, my patients know, my black patients know, I put Martin Luther King Jr. on a pedestal. I think the man was off the charts good at using Jesus's example, that Christian example of love, to assert what equality needed to look like. And I don't think it can happen even, quick today. I think it's getting better all the time, but I do believe that there are like long-term, deep-rooted, kind of just somewhat racial tenets that are carried through families. I don't think it's a systemic problem, depending on how you define systemic. So that's really how I feel about that. But I definitely don't think that if you ever put a state, a government power over that kind of process, the education of equality, I think all it does is actually further create segregation, separation, racism, dissension. I mean, I feel like there are plenty of black people who I've met in the last 2 years who are absolutely racist against me. I mean, so I think it's a two-way street. I wish there was a way to just avoid that. I don't know exactly what that is. I tend to always look towards the black leaders and the leadership in the community to say, hey, what do they see? And now, of course, not all blacks are going to agree just because you're black, because that would be a racist mentality. Oh, all blacks should agree. No, they don't all agree by any stretch. It's like, oh, whites don't agree. That's completely racist to think such a thing. So when I look at this, I think this, just me communicating about this, can be divisive, but in the end, if we stop and really get serious through this division, we start to identify how much of this am I carrying into this that's emotional, not logical, and can I really get to a place of unity off of pure emotion? I think the answer is no. I want to talk gender. So my belief on gender, there's not a place for gender, kind of education on basically, gender subscription and what that looks like in schools. I don't think that should be there. I think it's very quickly becoming a national story. So there's going to be pressure for familial education, and I believe that's where it belongs. Now, are there some people who just won't get it in their family? Absolutely. But I think the bulk, we're going to see the parents are the ones who really get to choose how they bring this out to their kids. And their kids come home and say, hey, I had a boy in school who I think is a boy, but I think there may be a girl, and I don't really know. And they told me to call them, they, not she or he. So I'm kind of confused. That's a parent-child topic. That's not a, hey kids, pull out your paper today or your pen today. I've got a paper I'm passing out, and I want you to answer these questions about what it means to be a boy, what it means to be a girl. There's no place for that. Now, how do I feel about it? I basically feel this way about it, and I kind of feel this way about a lot of things. Now, certain things maybe there's bigger global harm to our community. But on this one, if you want to change your gender through surgery and drugs, then you're welcome to. Now, do I believe that you actually truly changed your gender biologically? No. And the reason why is you can't replace your DNA. The DNA is in your cell. It doesn't change. So if the DNA is in your cell that says man, underlying, you are a man. Now, you can use hormones because you would like to appear more like a woman. You're trying to become more feminine, but in the end, you still can't replace the underlying DNA that you have. You can't. Now, let me backtrack one more. Should you be allowed to change your gender under the age of 18? I don't believe so. I don't believe at all. Nor do I believe that a parent should actually change a child's gender under the age of 18. I think that it should not be a parent's role. I think it should be something that happens when you're an adult. If you want to do it then, go ahead. Can you now, as a man going to a woman, compete against women in sports? Heck no. In the end, the DNA is the DNA is the DNA is the DNA. That should not be allowed in any way, shape, or form. I'm sorry. But they identify as a woman, and they also identify as a swimmer. So now you're taking away something they identify as. Look, I don't want to do that. But this is how we have to look at this. If we are now trying so hard to give you the life that you want, that we're taking away the life that others want or had, then this is wrong. Now, they're not taking away the life that you had. You've created a new one, so now it would just be a matter of, there seems to be a huge movement around this. Why would you not have your own division? I don't understand. It doesn't make sense. So, divisive? Perhaps. But I don't know how divisive, because honestly, of the people in the community, I know a few. And I am pretty sure, I don't know one, but I'm pretty sure for the most part, they see this big national discussion as hurting their movement, not helping their movement. It's kind of like I was reading this article from a black guy who is the CEO of a TV station. It's like one of those small TV stations, and it was pretty cool because he's talking about where everything goes wrong with racial equality. And basically what he said is when white elites get involved with fighting for racial equality, they ruin it. And I thought, you know what? That is so dead on. I would so much rather listen to someone who is a successful black individual talk to me about racial equality, and because I think, and that doesn't have to be successful, but just someone who I say successful, just like they've kind of gone through this they've seen the difficulty, they've seen the paths, the opportunities, they've got friends and cousins and nephews who've done great, and then they've got others who failed miserably, and they've seen the whole spectrum. I would rather have them talk to me about this than I would, some white elitist who's trying to and hey, there it is. I just lumped all Dems into white elitists. And I don't mean that as they're all white elitists, but I think some of them are. Like I would put Nancy Pelosi in that group, and I really can't stand listening to her talk about anything. So, but I would love to hear someone who actually had to live through that be the one leading the way. Right? And then I know you're going to have disagreement. There's going to be someone else who's black who's going to say, forget it, that's crazy, I don't know what they're talking about. There's all sorts of opportunity and there's equality everywhere, and I never encountered systemic racism. And it's like, okay, I really want to hear both sides, because in the end, that divisiveness or that disagreement is what allows us to figure out where unity needs to lie. And I think politics have really become extremely polarizing. More so than they ever should be. And I say that, why more so than they ever should be? Well, because I'm a Christian. Before I'm a politician, I'm a Christian. And that's not, God pretty much has said, get it right this way in order to get it right this way. You got to love each other, and you got to love God. It's not like love God or love each other. You got to do both. So, all right. So I don't know if I went through enough on the gender or the CRT there to kind of really put that to bed, but I guess the way I'd look at it is this. If you want to go and you want to change your gender, then as an adult, you're welcome to. Now, don't scream at me and tell me I got in your way if I just said it's okay to do it, but I didn't pave the path to make it, free. Like, there's no way that that should be free. No way that that should be covered under, some tax dollar, funded system. No way. This is because I don't want a penny of my money to go towards that, and I should have that right. I really should have that right. But now, should there be a path for you? Sure. And honestly, if enough people really care about that, then they should give to that. That's where they should give to. If you are an elite, very successful, progressive, and that makes sense for you, then give to that, because maybe that will become more mainstream and more in line with what people are doing one day. I don't think it will. I think it's always going to be a fringe thing. But it's become mainstream media because of this battle that I gotta have this, and it's kind of ridiculous. All right, and then. Back to CRT, my biggest issue there is that I think the moment that you line up, a group of individuals based upon race, skin color, however you want to put it, and then massively, lump some kind of distinction on them of, a favor or lack of favor. Like, look, all you white kids, you've had it too easy, so now we're going to make it harder on you. And then, we always want to let the black kids on the other side of the room, they're going to go first in line every time, and they're going to do everything first, or they're going to get this. And then if you guys score 90s on your tests, but then yours as an average is 80s, then what we're going to do is we're going to weight the questions differently to try to balance this out. We're going to figure out how to balance it out. And I would say, I just don't, like all of those things, like, no. I would say if there's a lack of performance here, then there should be support of performance. I think that's the key. So let's stop dividing it by race, and let's just look at, okay, so if there is a lack of performance in a group of kids, how do we help bring that performance up? How do we help give you more attention? How do we help do that in a scholastic setting? How do we help do that in a social setting outside of school? Like, what can we do outside of school? What opportunities can we provide that will give you more opportunity to learn, more opportunity to have time for study, or opportunity to study, or location to study, or equipment to study? How do we do that? How do we create opportunities to create upward mobility? That's key. That is really the key. And then with all of these, one of my biggest concerns is the more we layer stuff in on a teacher, the harder we make for a teacher to teach. We are stretching teachers to a point where they're going to break. And in this process, because it is so divisive of a discussion, we put teachers in a place where they walk on eggshells. Like, they just walk on eggshells. I don't know if I can say this. I don't know if I can say that. I'm not sure what I can do. I probably shouldn't touch that. Right? It just creates this environment where now, I'm at risk of being called out by either side all the time. That isn't good for your kids. It's not good for a child to be able to learn, to be able to focus on learning when their teacher can't focus on teaching that child without wondering where the fallback is, or the fallout is, where they're going to end up, being called out for having said something. Teacher said that George Washington did a great thing. I don't believe that. George Washington is a racist. Teacher said that George Washington is a racist. I can't believe that. George Washington is an amazing, founding father of our country. I mean, how do you operate in the middle of that? I don't know. But that's kind of what's been created. And I do believe it's in the vocal minority. And I think one of our biggest examples of why we know this is the vocal minority is because of the school board change that happened in San Francisco, when those 3 members were trying so hard to change the names of the schools and get rid of the names of founding fathers of this country, instead of trying to reopen the schools. So that's a progressive town, but obviously not as progressive as those school board members thought that it was, because they lost their seat based upon that. Because as progressive as they may have seemed, the actual constituents wanted schools open more than they cared about changing names. And that's in San Francisco. So guess what? When I say my child, my choice, I'm pretty confident that here in Cherokee County, there are more people who believe in health freedom Meaning no mandates, no mask mandates, no vaccine mandates. Don't go testing my kid every other day because they came in contact. Don't trace. Don't label as potentially at risk, sick. We look at. I read through so much of the of what our constitutions say and the individual state articles say about what you can do in a pandemic. And it's interesting because the reality is what they pretty much said is that you can quarantine individuals that are proven to be dangerous to society. That's it. Well, so here we are, and we're calling kids, or we called kids, dangerous to society because of potential interaction with someone who then later tested positive, who was asymptomatic, so therefore they could have potentially spread it, which I still tell you is wrong. There has to be some symptom to provide sputum, so it just is wrong. Asymptomatic spread. The problem is that they just didn't call symptomatic. Again, back to Keisha Lance Bottoms. Oh, I was asymptomatic. All I had was a headache and a sore throat. Like, what are you talking about? You just described two symptoms. So again, that's the goal here is freedom, because I know that this county believes in that. Freedom. Well, what do I mean by freedom? Well, freedom to go to school without a mask on if you choose not to. If you are sick, then don't go. And that's kind of been the rule now of the last 10 years. It's gotten more and more of, if your kid has symptoms, don't send them to school. Okay, well then just follow that rule. Don't worry about if it's COVID or if it's flu or if it's just a random rhinovirus. Doesn't matter. So they're sick, don't send them to school. Like, that rule makes sense. So, all right. So, let's see. I think that was all on my list of examples for, yeah, it is. So let's talk about how this kind of plays out. It's interesting in politics. I noticed that in politics, everyone has an opinion, and it's a really significant, strong opinion. I also know that everyone wants to catch everyone. So, I had this podcast that this one woman yelled and screamed about and said I was all, focused on myself and boisterous. And okay, I don't think so. But I'll tell you one thing. I'm not going to take that podcast down. I'm definitely not going to replace it with another one that looks as though I never had that podcast up, but I have another one in that's supposedly from the same date. I'm not gonna change who I am over that. And maybe I'm the wrong person. Okay, I don't think I'm the wrong person. So, in a political sense, in this environment, how do I make this work? I believe that every single time the job of the leadership is to hear all sides of a story, is to understand the majority's desire, and it's to figure out how can we lead towards what the majority wants without completely oppressing what the minority wants, when we have gotten to a logical discussion, emotion off the table. So, and I think, what happens is because the Board of Education, because it's kids, right? Because it's our kids, emotion always enters first. It's almost like we lead with emotion, right? Because I don't want anyone getting anywhere near my kids. Don't mess with my kids. I think about, the gender issue. My biggest issue there would be if I was ever in an environment where a male who now identifies as female was in an area or a place where my daughters were using a restroom, and there was somehow any ability of them to see, hear, listen, like none of that. That would bring emotion out. But why? Well, if we back it up, because logically, it provides an opportunity for someone who doesn't actually identify as said female, but is a male, to fulfill some level of demented fantasy. That's a logical way to look at it, and that can't happen. So in the end, if we always come back to, well, let's talk about, what is that logical look? Well, the logical look is what really matters. What's the data say about kids when kids went back to school in 2020 in Europe? What did the data say about the spread of COVID between kids, among kids, and to parents or teachers? It said it was almost non-existent. And this is data. These are research studies. And someone could say, well, they weren't great research studies. Well, yeah, maybe they weren't great, but they were really pretty good for early understanding of what to expect out of passage of the virus among youth and youth to adults. Yet we didn't use that. We didn't take that. Now we look and we see what the CDC says today, and we say, oh, okay, so now you're going to go ahead and you're going to pay attention to the data that we had. And on that, CDC, I think I talked about it before. I'm divisive as get out when it comes to public health, and I'm sorry. I feel as though they've had an underlying agenda for as long as I have known about the CDC. So I've been practicing 21 years as a chiropractor, and chiropractors tend to be natural health professionals. It's not that I'm completely against drugs. I'm just against the absolute overuse of drugs. And I think many of you would agree that that's a problem. Just let's see. Who in the room here, and you're in the room right now, believes that, it's a good idea to have an aspiration or a goal to be on more medications? Who in the room has that as an aspiration or a goal to be on more medications? Well, that's a dumb question, right? None of you are going to raise your hand to that. None of you believe it's a good idea. So then I think we're all on the same page. We get that? We all believe the same thing, that we should pursue things in life, opportunities in life, activities in life that reduce our need for anything that the medical profession provides, other than immediate urgent care, because maybe I had a genetic disposition to something, or I failed to live a certain way, or I had a trauma that caused. But other than that, my pursuits should be, I am going to fight for my own personal health. Well, because of that, what the CDC always does and has forever is put everyone into the least common denominator mentality. You're all weak, you're all bad, you're all dying, and you need us. You need the flu shot every single year. Well, I know most of you don't believe that because the number of people that get the flu shot every year is an insignificant number in our population. But that's what they would have you do. And that's where they got their foot in the door on COVID to make that change. And then you start hearing about, we'll get a COVID flu shot combination so that every year you can line up for your COVID flu shot. What's the reason? Is it because they want to put mind-controlling nanobots inside of the shot? Hey, maybe. That's not my conspiracy theory. That's someone else's. I don't think that's it at all. My belief is that they think the world would be a better place if everyone got a flu shot every year. And I personally think the world would be a worse place. Why? Let's talk about the logical reasons. That's what I would say. So I'm not going to do that right now, but I wanted you guys to understand. So hopefully I didn't go too long. I apologize for taking so much time, but I'm so grateful that you listened to the end, assuming you're still listening. All right, God bless. Be well.